gives everybody a chance to see what it's like.
Well, you had some big changes during your administration here in the White House in terms of which rooms?
Well,
the blue room, I know.
The blue room we did a lot of work in, the East room, and the dining room we wanted to bring back a little more toward the idea of the early 20th century renovation that President Theodore Roosevelt had done. But then I got pictures of his dining room, and there were heads, stuffed heads of animals that he had shot all over. And I said, well, we'll bring back the mahogany, and we'll bring back something of the color scheme in the drapes. We're not bringing back the heads.
Good.
We had to draw a line somewhere.
I like taxidermy, but I don't think I'd like it here in this White House.
So, no.
You really had a tremendous amount to do with each and every one of the events planned here at the White House. Did they really interest you, these dinners? Did you really enjoy going to them night after night?
Well, I did, because we were entertaining people who were making history. And it was exciting, but it was a little bit of a challenge, because there was there were decisions to be made, like moving from French service, which had always been the way meals were served, to plated service, so that we'd be able to accommodate more people and have a beautiful presentation. Those were all changes with traditions, and it took a lot of time working it through, but I really had a great time doing it. I must confess, it was one of my favorite parts.
Looking back, what was your favorite state dinner?
Oh my gosh, that's so hard. Having Nelson Mandela in the White House for any reason makes it special. I'm an enormous fan of his.
Oh, I am too.
When we entertained Tony Blair, the Prime Minister of England, we had, as the after-dinner entertainment, Elton John and Stevie Wonder. Oh. That was pretty amazing.
Pretty exciting.
Our very first really formal state dinner was for the Emperor and Empress of Japan, and the Rose Garden just looked magical that night with the twinkling lights.
So we're sitting in the red room.
Yes.
Who is responsible for this particular decoration in this red room?
This is still very much Jackie Kennedy's room. She and the people with whom she worked really transformed this room. We just replaced the wall coverings because, of course, they fade over time, but we wanted to keep this same look, and we added this wonderful portrait of Dolly Madison up there as a kind of homage to her. I've tried to collect portraits of every president and first lady. We can't display them all, but she's one I wanted especially to have on the wall.
She's quite attractive, too, in her empire dress.
Yes, I know.
Looking very French.
Yeah.
So maybe you could show me something, the green room?
There's some of the original furniture that James Monroe bought, so we could see some of that in the blue room.
Oh, in the blue room, too.
Yes.
Okay, good. And when we come back, there's so much more to talk about. Of course, the president's house is open to tours, and thousands come to see it every year. But historically, the biggest public event at the White House has always been the annual Easter egg roll. Thomas Edison filmed it in 1902. It's a tradition that started in 1878, after Congress forbid children from using the hill in front of the Capitol to roll Easter eggs. President Rutherford B. Hayes came to the rescue, opening the White House grounds to pint-sized revelers and their parents, some with the first home cameras. Now, every Easter, 10,000 eggs are decorated for children to chase across the White House lawn. Next, we'll see how events like this get planned with Social Secretary Capricia Marshall. To subscribe to Martha Stewart Living Magazine, please call our 800 number. I think I've received, a couple of invitations to dinner at the White House, and I'm very proud of them. And all these invitations emanate from the room in which I'm sitting. It's the room of the Social Secretary to the President and the First Lady of the United States. And since 1997, Capricia Marshall has been the Social Secretary, and I'm so happy that you're allowing us to be here amidst this controlled chaos of the move-out.
Please, my pleasure.
You're going to be moving out in just a few days.
That's right. That's right. I've had 8 years of memories here. I walked through the doors with the Clintons in January of 1993, and walking out with them.
Capricia, say you're having a dinner for the Prime Minister of India. How many months before you start planning the dinner?
Well, quite a few months, and they will send a delegation here to the United States. They will be met by our Chief of Protocol, Ambassador Mel French. We will then meet with them and discuss all the various issues, from clothes to colors to flowers, because as you well know, there are some flowers that are offensive in certain countries, and as well colors that are offensive.
Can you give us an example of an offensive flower?
Well, in China, the lily, a certain type of lily that you are not to use because it symbolizes death, also the color white. We have to stay away from the color white often because that symbolizes death as well.
Every bit of that knowledge and experience is needed on a typical day of a state dinner. Housemen and cleaning staff start early to prepare the president's house to look its finest. On these days, it's not just a house, but a symbol of America to another world power. Preparations are so intricate, there's even a director of logistics, Laura Schwartz, who reviews pages of carefully scripted schedules to ensure every contingency is covered.
Okay, we're going to start the escorts out to the South Lawn now.
7:30 a.m. The assembled press hustles from the briefing room to get the best spot outside.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is an audio check from the South Lawn of the White House. 10, 9, 8, 7.
Places for the dignitaries are marked on the lawn.
I am Mrs. Gore. I am Secretary Christopher. I am Mrs. Shelley Kochfield.
As the diplomatic corps and other guests take their places, the excitement mounts. At last, the visiting head of state is cued to leave for the White House. Exactly 5 minutes later, the President and First Lady move into position with all the pomp and polish the office demands. Capricia and her staff wait in the wings. It might be their only moment of downtime in a long and busy day where nothing can go wrong. Fortunately, there is a safety net for protocol.
Do you have notebooks here outlining all of this?
Absolutely. And that knowledge is passed down from administration to administration.
Have you, as Social Secretary, had anything like even coming close to a disaster in terms of a dinner?
Well, as you know, we try to hide anything behind the scenes that may occur so the guests have absolutely no idea that something may have gone awry. But there was, during the visit of the President of Ghana, a bit of a disaster. Patti LaBelle was supposed to be our entertainment that evening, and she called with a horrific cold.
Oh my
she was just
gosh.
unable to make it. Mrs. Clinton, so smart that she is, got in the most wonderful jazz group, Najee,
Oh,
and
good.
they
Yeah, they're
entertained the
wonderful.
president.
Oh, that's good.
And he loved them, and he's an enormous jazz aficionado like our president. So it turned out to be a great success.
It's not difficult to get a world-class artist like soprano Kathleen Battle to perform at the White House. The goal is to find a performer who will resonate with the foreign visitors, as cellist Yo-Yo Ma did for the Chinese premier's dinner. Early in the afternoon, the press is sometimes invited for a performer's technical run-through. Meanwhile, the butlers make sure the state dining room tables look perfect. Later in the afternoon, Capricia, florist Nancy Clark, and chef Walter Scheib host a press preview to talk about the dinner.
And the interesting thing about these tulips is, with the warmth in the room, the tulips will actually move during the evening. They'll open and close and move back and forth.
6:45 p.m., the guests arrive.
Did everybody respond in the affirmative to the invitation?
No.
No, not everybody can always come, I guess.
That's true. And often what is the case is that we receive last-minute requests.
At exactly 7:13 p.m., Capricia guides the President and First Lady downstairs to greet the visiting head of state, who will arrive shortly at the North Portico. Few know it, but behind the scenes, the White House staff is in high gear. After a short visit in the presidential quarters, it's on to the receiving line, where the head of state meets America's best and brightest.
Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in a toast to the Premier of China, Zhu Rongji, Madame Lau.
After a round of official toasts, dinner is finally served. Conservation was the byword of the White House during World War I, when Mrs. Wilson grazed sheep on the lawn and auctioned off the wool for the war effort. Mrs. Adams raised silkworms at the White House, spinning the threads herself. And until Teddy Roosevelt smashed the glass houses and built the West Wing, nearly every early administration had year-round gardens in these conservatories. Photographed here with a visiting tribe of Native Americans. Flowers from the conservatories decorated the Blue Room wedding of President Grover Cleveland to Frances Folsom. But there were no flowers in the Polk White House. At that time, there was a common belief that flowers in close quarters gave off unhealthy vapors. Coming up next, a visit to the White House.
much to see in the catacombs as well as in the upper rooms. Now this is starting to feel more like home for me.
I think that you might recall this next person.
Oh, hello.
Nancy Clark.
Yes, Nancy. How are you?
Hi, nice to see you.
Nancy Clark, and your official title here is?
The Chief Floral Designer.
Are these for the White House?
This is for a dinner that we're doing up at Camp David.
So you have lots of flowers to do for Camp David. Do you do all the flowers for the entire White House? Every
Yes, we're
room?
completely presidential support. And
the family's quarters, too?
The family's quarters, the West Wing, and anything that he might need if he's traveling on the road.
And when a big state dinner is being planned, who actually decides on the color scheme, the flower arrangements, the centerpieces?
Well, Capricia and I usually work together and come up with some ideas. That's right.
Well, we work together and put together several options, and then we bring them to the First Lady, and she usually looks at them, decides that she likes a little bit from this one and a little bit from that one, and then makes an amazing centerpiece for that evening's dinner.
So does she ever come down here and cut flowers with you? Oh, really? Good.
Yeah, she's come down, and we've worked on samples down here before, and a lot of times we'll set it up in the location because it gives us an opportunity to see how it's going to look.
Where do you get all your flowers from?
We buy them from all of our local wholesalers. Some of them are from local growers. Some of them are from the auctions, the floral auctions around the world.
They're beautiful. The roses are spectacular.
Thank you.
And how many people work here in this department?
We have 4 full-time people and 11 part-time people when we have a big event.
And sometimes you have, what, 100 tables to do?
Sometimes we have 100 tables, sometimes we have 150 tables.
Oh, really? Do you make these flower arrangements the same day or a day in advance?
I try to do the centerpieces. They're going to be right in front of the guests on the same day. When we have a lot of centerpieces, we'll do a system where maybe we'll partially finish them and then complete them the next day. Any other flower arrangements that are in the area, for example, on the state floor, maybe on the north walls in the red room or in the green room, we can do those the day before because they're not quite as closely scrutinized.
Right. But they're always beautiful. I've never seen a dead flower at the White House. And you have such amazing containers here, too. Look at those are gorgeous, Nancy.
We have a fabulous vermeil collection, and our curators are wonderful about letting us use this collection. And these are some of the containers that we use.
Oh, it's so beautifully made. When is that from, do you think?
I believe this is from the 1800s.
Oh, it's amazing.
And there's actually 4 of these. And we use these quite often for centerpieces when we want to run a long centerpiece down a wooden table or something.
And there's some great urns there. I've been
just wonderful containers.
I love looking around places like this and the archives, I call it. So these always stay in the flower room?
Yes, we keep these in here.
This is beautiful.
And
wow.
Now, when we use that container, we put a liner in it so that we don't do any damage to the vermeil.
Right.
And
vermeil is gold over silver, if you don't know, but it's very valuable and very amazingly well crafted. So most of this is English, do you think?
Yes, it is. A lot of it is.
The secret inside the containers? Green floral foam and chicken wire. The wire holds the foam so it doesn't crumble under the weight of the flowers, and the foam holds the most important element, water.
Use lots and lots of water. I know people put preservative in things and they try to do everything, but flowers need a lot of water.
Right, so do you fill the containers all the way up to the top?
We always fill our containers up to the top, and we repeatedly fill them up to the top. Flowers need a nice fresh cut to open the stem so that they can drink the water, and they need water, and my recommendation is warm water.
And a flower arrangement like this will last for how long? Do you really plan it just for the dinner?
No, actually, this flower arrangement is going to do for 2 dinners.
Oh.
It's going to do for a dinner on Friday night and a dinner on Sunday night.
Oh, so that's good. It is very nice to see you, and are you going to stay here?
Yes.
Oh, you are? You stay on?
Yes.
Oh, good.
Yes,
well,
I've been here for a while.
Well, I'll see you in the next administration. Good luck, and thanks so much.
Thank you.
White House dinners have changed a lot since the heart-stopping 29-course meals of the Grant administration. And those jumbo meals might have been just right for President Taft. He weighed 332 pounds and once got stuck in the White House bathtub until he ordered a new one that could fit 4 normal-sized men. For breakfast, President Taft would down 2 oranges, a 12-ounce steak, several pieces of toast slathered with butter, and a vast quantity of coffee with sugar and cream, all cooked in this simple kitchen. Yes, times have changed, and so has the White House kitchen.
So here we are again.
Yes, here we are.
Hi, Walter. How are you?
Well, nice to see you.
Oh, very nice to see you.
How are you?
Hello, Walter.
So I understand you're getting busy, very busy for this weekend.
Yes, we are.
And,
Getting ready to go up to Camp David.
Yeah.
Do
How
several functions.
many dinners?
There'll be 3 dinners.
A lot of people.
Anywhere from 60 to about 120.
So what's that? Just baby spinach.
This is a baby hydroponic spinach from Central America.
It's beautiful looking.
Yeah, it really is quite nice. Just have to make sure we get all the little stems off and check each leaf. So it's a little bit tedious. It's not all glamour. Some of it's just manual labor.
The detail is well worth it.
That's what it
Well,
is.
when you come up with a menu, does Mrs. Clinton do all the menus with you?
Oh, absolutely. And she will call Mr. Scheib directly and walk through the various details of the menu. For instance, on one occasion, Walter had decided to experiment with bison, and it had never been done here before.
The American beef, I guess. Why? Why did you choose it?
There's a variety of reasons. First and foremost is that it's tremendously low in fat. It still has a great flavor, which is unique. It's much less fatted than there is in beef, but the flavor is more subtle and fulfilling. Also, it's a local product. It comes out of a farm outside of Charlottesville, Virginia.
Any other extraordinary ingredients that you've cooked with that has never been served at the White House before?
Well, I don't know what's been served here before. What we have tried to do is to live up to the First Lady's mandate, which was to feature what was best and most unique in American food, wine, and entertaining, and I think we've accomplished that.
Well, Walter, I understand that you have a green thumb. It looks a little bit green today with all that spinach, but you really do have a roof garden here at the White House?
Yeah, the National Park Service and we have put together a small garden up on the roof, tomatoes and other vegetables, and one of our Mrs. Clinton's favorites is the hot peppers that we grow up there.
Yes,
So
what variety?
there are several different varieties, from the little ones up to the larger ones, but she loves the spicy ones. And this also gives us the opportunity to do what we're always talking about, which is using the best and the freshest ingredients. Obviously, having them growing and picking them right off the vine or the bush at the time is the best way to go.
Well, you look really busy, so we won't really keep you, but...
You can always stay and help us clean some spinach.
I could definitely do that. But it's been a pleasure knowing you, and I hope I see you in the new administration.
Sure we will.
And good luck, guys.
Thank you.
The White House has always been the people's house. If you wanted to see President Lincoln, all you had to do was walk upstairs. Well-wishers at his inauguration even felt free to cut bits of the carpet and the curtains for souvenirs. But that didn't stop the president from holding great receptions he called public opinion baths, so he could hear what was going on in the country. He would shake so many hands, he had to soak his own afterwards. He wasn't alone. For years on New Year's Day, anyone could line up outside the White House to meet the president, until Herbert Hoover stopped the custom after shaking 6,000 hands in one afternoon. Of course, most White House events required invitations. This is the first one from John and Abigail Adams, a printed card with blanks for the day, time, and guest's name. They could have used a White House calligrapher like the one we'll meet next.
You have a staff of calligraphers here in the White House.
Yes. This is Rick Muffler.
Hi, Rick.
Hi, it's a pleasure.
You've been here for how long?
23 years.
And I understand that you're third generation in the White House.
Third generation employee, yes,
Oh,
ma'am.
yes? Tell me, your grandfather was?
A chauffeur.
Uh-huh.
And he started with Coolidge. My father was the electrician and / clock winder.
Ah.
And he started with Franklin Roosevelt.
Rick's father, Johnny Muffler, worked at the White House longer than any other employee. President Truman even mentioned him in his 1952 televised tour.
We have a special man that winds clocks every Friday.
How many clocks are in the White House?
As he puts it, lots of them.
Really? Oh, boy, this looks like a rather long address.
Yeah.
Can I see that?
Yes. There you are.
This reads, the Right Honorable, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland and Mrs. Blair. So nowhere does it say Tony Blair.
Correct.
It would be incorrect to do that.
That's true.
And the actual invitation only has to say Prime Minister and Mrs. Blair?
That's true. What we do is address the inside invitation as you would either address them in face-to-face or as they would be announced to another guest.
I see. And these are beautiful invitations.
Thank you.
So they're a blue paper on top of a gold paper.
Right.
And then the gold matches very nicely, too. Does that take some care?
A lot of planning, a lot of trial and error.
But the whole invitation, is this printed at a printer's, or do you do all the calligraphy?
Actually, what happens is we'll do one original and have it sent out for reproduction. And what we try to do is match the script that's on the invitation so it looks as if each and every invitation has been hand done.
So besides an invitation and the envelope of the invitation, what else is required in the calligraphy office?
Wow. Just about everything.
Menus?
It needs to look beautiful. We do it from citations and commissions for the senior staff.
Oh, of course. You have all of that, too.
And we do place cards, for example.
What happens with the lines afterwards?
We'll erase those.
You erase those.
I use a plastic eraser.
Oh, you do.
But after you've done an original piece of art for a long period of time, it is very frustrating to get to the very last line of your invitation or menu and misspell a word.
Well, now your associate over here is very busy.
That's right. This is Rick Paulus, our chief
Hi,
calligrapher.
Rick. And you're using a very unusual pen that I thought everybody would be really interested to see. Now, tell us about it.
This is a great pen. This is an oblique pen holder, and it allows the pen nib to approach the paper at an angle that your wrist won't allow it to. This is particularly comfortable. It's a nice hand-turned wood one. I just feel like
it's beautiful.
I keep it in my hand about 20 hours a day.
I'm so curious about all the wonderful paper that you're using for the invitations. This blue paper is beautiful. It really does show up the gold ink. Is this all domestic paper that you're using?
Absolutely domestic papers. Most of the work we do is on Crane's paper stock, but for this particular event, Whitehouse 200th anniversary is such a special event, we wanted to go with something that looked entirely different. This is a Strathmore paper.
And this is the presidential seal?
And that's the presidential seal. That's got quite a history. Right from the beginning of our country, it's kind of developed over the years. And if you look during wartime years, the eagle's facing towards the arrows, and right now it's facing towards the oak leaves.
What job in the last 8 years gave you the most grief? What was most difficult?
I think the only difficult evening was because of the spelling and the different languages that we were dealing with. It was the 50th anniversary of the celebration of NATO. We had to change things and make it all exact.
That was 1,000 people for one dinner.
Oh.
And the dinner was surrounded by a dinner the night before and 3 or 4 lunches between Mrs. Clinton and the president in the surrounding days. Yeah.
Well, I cherish the few invitations that I have. I'm going to keep them forever. I hope I get some more sometime in the future. And I really congratulate you on the beautiful, beautiful work that you and your compatriots here in the office accomplish. It's amazing.
Thank you.
Some of the strangest events at the White House occurred during the Jackson administration. When the popular war hero was inaugurated, a mob of people forced their way into the White House, looking for food and drink, standing on furniture, pulling down draperies, and breaking glasses and china as they shoved to see the new president. Jackson had to escape through a window and spent the night in a hotel. Several years later, an admirer from New York sent Jackson a huge wheel of cheese, weighing 1,400 pounds. Nearly a ton of fun for the public invited to come and help themselves. And they did, polishing it off in just a few hours. Unfortunately, they ground cheese into the carpet that smelled all the way into the Van Buren administration. We Americans have come a long way in dinner protocol, as we'll see next, again with Social Secretary.
Well, we've moved to another busy room in the East Wing of the White House with Capricia Marshall, and she's going to talk to us about the seating of the state dinners, of all the dinners here at the White House. As Social Secretary, she knows how important it is to seat the right people with the right people. What is the biggest challenge when you are seating a dinner like this?
Well, there's certain protocol involved in particular dinners, in particularly a state dinner. There are certain seating arrangements that I have to stay with. And then, of course, there are the specific selections of both the President and Mrs. Clinton.
Do they have their favorite people they want to be with at a dinner?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, so they know the guest list really well.
They do.
Do they ever fight over a guest?
On occasion, the President has selected someone that, as well, Mrs. Clinton has selected. And so there's a toss-up, and usually the President gives in.
Oh, he gives in, how nicely. But I see you have the President and Senator Clinton here.
That's right.
So let's take a dinner, and not even an imaginary one. I was invited to the state dinner for the president of Hungary. And I was separated from my escort, but I got a really good seat. I got to sit at President Clinton's table. So now how does that happen? How do you separate husbands and wives and dates?
Yes, absolutely we do. We find that it actually helps with conversation in the room because generally speaking, if you're seated next to someone that you're very familiar with, you won't talk to others on your left or your right.
Have any couples ever, like, declined being separated?
Yes, they have.
They have.
But we can accommodate that very quickly. We can move the tables around at the last minute. And we also will have a table host at each table. And their job for the evening is to make sure that the entire table knows what is the certain protocol for the evening, and also to make sure that conversation is lively and that there are things about the evening that they know.
And like, when do you tell the table host that they're the table host?
That usually late morning, early afternoon. We'll send out letters because the tables at that point are generally speaking final. And we'll send out exactly who's at their table, and then later on an update in case changes had been made.
Now, I don't know if you've ever seen one of these clock arrangements. It looks like a bunch of clocks on a great big board, but these little spokes represent the guests.
That's right. And then we color code, and we try to put women on the white tabs and men on the blue. So we can mix it up, making sure that we do somewhat a man-woman sort of arrangement around the table.
Now, are these 60-inch tables, or?
That's right, they are.
Okay, so 5-foot round tables, typical 10 people to a table.
That's right.
Do you ever try to squeeze in 11, or do you ever have to?
Well, on occasion, the President and Mrs. Clinton can't quite cut their table. And so I'll immediately call over to the residents, and I'll ask the chief usher, do you by chance have one that's just slightly bigger that we can add 2 more people?
Like a 72-inch table?
That's right, a 72-inch table. And generally speaking, our claws will accommodate that.
Are all the cloths here at the White House for every single dinner, or do you ever rent things?
We rent on many occasions.
Oh, you do?
Yes, and because depending, again, with protocol, we have to be careful of certain colors, certain styles, and sometimes even certain fabrics.
Now, if there is a president of a country and the president's wife, doesn't the president usually sit with Senator Clinton?
That's right.
Okay, and the president's wife would sit with President Clinton.
And on occasion...
To the right or to the left?
Always to the right.
Okay.
The position of honor is always to the right.
How do you deal with dietary requests? Do people, when they accept, say, I'm a vegetarian, or are they too shy about that, too?
We actually ask. We'd like to know up front so that before people are seated, we will know at table 4 there are 2 vegetarians and actually 2 kosher requests. And those accommodations have already been made. The butler will know, and he will then go back into the kitchen and retrieve those special requests.
Do people try to get a invitation to the White House?
Yes, and in many and varied ways. They will call 100 or so people that they know in any position here at the White House and have them phone bank me. And if they're on the list and they're to be considered, we will, you know, of course say, please wait until your invitation arrives. If they are not on the list and are not going to be considered, we would say, it is so nice of you to want to come to this event. We will keep you in mind for a future event.
Very nice. And what a good social secretary. Well, thank you very much for showing us this extraordinary task of seating guests at a White House dinner.
Thank you.
Few know it, but the first televised tour of the White House was on CBS in 1952, when President Harry Truman showed Walter Cronkite his recent renovation. He decorated the diplomatic reception room with portraits of the First Ladies.
But I think it looks much better with these good-looking ladies in it.
10 years later, America was fascinated with the stylish young First Lady, Jacqueline Kennedy, and the antiques she rescued from the White House attic.
And this, as we like to have mainly American furniture and things, is rather like Staffordshire, but it's American pottery, which is very rare.
As she walked us through the house, it was the first time many Americans had seen these historic rooms, which she redid with one thing in mind.
No, I just think that everything in the White House should be the best, the entertainment that's given here. And if it's an American company that you can help, I like to do that. If it's not, just as long as it's the best.
Like many of the things the Kennedys did, the televised tour inspired a generation of young people. As President Kennedy put it,
some of them may want to someday live here themselves, which I think would be very good. Even the girls.
Next, one of those girls will show us her home of 8 years as we get a personal tour of the White House.
the Blue Room, which we finished renovating a couple of years ago. We wanted to get a deeper, richer shade of blue, and so we chose this sapphire blue. And I think it just has more warmth and life to it. But we kept the same furnishings, although, of course, we reupholstered the chairs. And these are from the original suite of furniture that James Monroe bought for the White House after it was rebuilt when it had been burned. There's a funny story about this because, of course, the furniture was ordered from Paris, which was the center of all fashion at the time. And the original order, which went to the purchasing agent for President Monroe, asked for just plain mahogany wood furniture. And the agent thought, well, there must be some mistake if this is going into the home of the president. So they gilded it. And we've kept it that way ever since.
Now, this is Mrs. Monroe up here on the wall in her ermine?
And in her ermine,
oh,
yes,
my gosh.
indeed.
What other changes did you make in here?
This was all changed. The drapes, the wallpaper, the rug.
The chandelier is original?
The chandelier is the original. One of my biggest challenges was, how to try to put the border on the top to make it look like it was, drapery.
I love that.
Isn't that nice?
Oh,
I had them cut out. There was a piece that was originally there between the ceiling and the wallpaper, which I had cut out, and I thought it looked more like it was actually hanging there. A woman whom I've known for a very long time, Kaki Hockersmith, researched this. She went to France. She researched the wallpaper design. This is a pattern that was used back in the early 19th century. This is one of my favorite portraits of Thomas Jefferson.
Is he one of your favorite presidents?
He is not, it's funny, I admire him greatly, and I think he's done an extraordinary amount for shaping America as it is today, but he's a complicated man. I don't know quite how to evaluate him. I think about him, certainly he planned the Lewis and Clark expedition in the East Room that led to the expansion of America. He was a visionary with the Louisiana Purchase. He did so many things, but he's complicated.
John Adams, our first inhabitant of the White House?
Yes, John Adams, the first inhabitant with his wonderful wife, Abigail, and he's someone who I think is going to be given more of history's due. This I love, John Tyler. He's holding a crumpled up newspaper, which is probably the way every president who's ever lived here feels after reading the newspaper.
Right.
There's our biggest president, and I mean big, William Howard Taft, who had to have a special bathtub brought into the White House so that he could, be fitted into it.
Now, can I ask who your favorite president other than President Clinton was? Do you know? I mean,
well,
when you live here, you must get ghost feelings, don't you?
I do. Well, there are four that I particularly like and admire. Abraham Lincoln, who imbues the house with his spirit. Teddy Roosevelt, who had a lot of influence on the House, and Franklin Roosevelt and Harry Truman. So the four people who actually influenced the House, both in a spiritual way and in a very physical way, are ones that I also, for historic reasons, admire.
And now, Hillary, could we go to the green room as our last stop here in the staterooms, because it's just so beautiful.
Thank you. I think so, too. Let's go. Okay. So here we are coming into the green room, and it is very similar to the way it was when Mrs. Kennedy first did it, including the same wall covering, although it's had to be replaced because of the wear and tear. But
it's a green moire silk.
It is a moire, and it's such a cozy room.
And here's the Henry Tanner.
It is. I know.
It's beautiful.
Well, he was an African American who, as you can tell, was a great artist who couldn't really work in our country and went to Europe, but still painted a lot of scenes like this from, Atlantic City.
That's New Jersey, yes. I grew up near there.
Dunes. Yeah, well, you can recognize that landscape.
One of the most beautiful beaches in America, actually.
And a lot of people don't know that. They don't appreciate how beautiful those New Jersey beaches are.
Very, very beautiful. And the Georgia O'Keeffe.
I know. I wanted to have some 20th century artists, and we've had wonderful African-American artists and women artists that were not represented.
Betty, your curator, said that this is one of her favorite things in the White House.
Well, it is for me, too, and it was in Georgia O'Keeffe's possession at the time of her death. It was part of her estate. She left very firm instructions that it should never be framed. When we saw the colors and how they worked with the colors here in this room, we just knew this is where it belonged.
Now, one of the most pensive portraits is that of Benjamin Franklin. That's early. Is that the earliest painting in the White House? It seems to date from the 1700s.
Well, it certainly is an early painting. I'm not sure it's the earliest, but it's my favorite of Ben Franklin. But you can see how the artist portrayed him even then, a man of, you know, intellect and learning, but also, you know, kind of a dandy. I mean, he liked the court life. He spent a lot of time at Versailles convincing the French to come into the revolution on our side. I know.
Well, your life has been so intertwined with the history of the United States, with the history of this beautiful home. Thank you very much for a last look at a very amazing place.
Well, thank you for your good work.
Thank you.
Friday on Martha Stewart Living.
Every bride, no matter who she is, needs help planning